Chapter 9 of Stories from Virgil. Stories from Virgil. Chapter 9. The Love and Death of Dido. Much was Queen Dido moved by the story, and much did she marvel at him that told it, and scarce could sleep for thinking of him. And the next day she spake to Anna, her sister, O my sister, I have been troubled this night with ill dreams, and my heart is disquieted within me. What a man is this stranger that hath come to our shores! How noble of mien! How bold in war! Sure I am that he is of the sons of the gods. What fortunes have been his! Of what wars he told us! Surely, were I not steadfastly purposed that I would not yoke me again in marriage, this were the man to whom I might yield. Only he, for I will tell thee the truth, my sister, only he, since the day when Sychaeus died by his brother's hand, hath moved my heart. But may the earth swallow me up, or the Almighty Father strike me with lightning, ere I stoop to such baseness. The husband of my youth hath carried with him my love, and he shall keep it in his grave. So she spake, with many tears, and her sister made answer, Why wilt thou waste thy youth in sorrow, without child or husband? Thinkest thou that there is care or remembrance of such things in the grave? No suitors indeed have pleased thee here or in Tyre. But wilt thou also contend with a love that is after thine own heart? Think, too, of the nations among whom thou dwellest, how fierce they are, and of thy brother at Tyre, what he threatens against thee. Surely it was by the will of the Gods, and of Juno chiefly, that the ships of Troy came hither. And this city, which thou buildest, to what greatness will it grow, if only thou wilt make for thyself such alliance? How great will be the glory of Carthage, if the strength of Troy be joined unto her! Only do thou pray to the Gods, and offer sacrifices. And, for the present, seeing that the time of sailing is now past, make excuse that these strangers tarry with thee awhile. Thus did Anna comfort her sister and encourage her. And first the two offered sacrifice to the Gods, chiefly to Juno, who careth for the bond of marriage. Also, examining the entrails of slain beasts, they sought to learn the things that should happen thereafter. And ever Dido would company with Aeneas, leading him about the walls of the city which she builded. And often she would begin to speak, and stay in the midst of her words. And when even was come, she would hear again, and again, at the banquet, the tale of Troy, and while others slept would watch, and while he was far away would seem to see him and to hear him. Ascanius too she would embrace for love of his father, if so she might cheat her own heart. But the work of the city was stayed meanwhile, nor did the towers rise in their places, nor the youth practise themselves in arms. Then Juno, seeing how it fared with the queen, spake to Venus, Are ye satisfied with your victory, thou and thy son, that ye have vanquished the two of you one woman? Well I knew that thou fearedst lest this Carthage should harm thy favourite. But why should there be war between us? Thou hast what thou seekest. Let us make alliance. Let Dido obey a Phrygian husband, and bring the men of Tyre as her dowry. But Venus knew that she spake with ill intent, to the end that the men of Troy should not reign in the land of Italy. Nevertheless, she dissembled with her tongue, and spake, Who would not rather have peace with thee than war? Only I doubt whether this thing shall be to the pleasure of Jupiter. This thou must learn, seeing that thou art his wife, and where thou leadest I will follow. So the two, taking counsel together, ordered things in this wise. The next day a great hunting was prepared. For as soon as ever the sun was risen upon the earth, the youth of the city assembled, with nets and hunting spears and dogs that ran by scent. And the princes of Carthage waited for the queen at the palace door, where her horse stood champing the bit, with trappings of purple and gold. And after a while she came forth, with many following her, and she had upon her a Sidonian mantle, with a border wrought with divers colours. Of gold was her quiver, and of gold the knot of her hair, and of gold the clasp to her mantle. Aeneas likewise came forth, beautiful as is Apollo when he leaveth Lydia and the stream of Xanthus, coming to Delos, and hath about his hair a wreath of bay leaves, and a circlet of gold. So fair was Aeneas to see. And when the hunters came to the hills, they found great store of goats and stags, which they chased. And of all the company Ascanius was the foremost, thinking scorn of such hunting, and wishing that a wild boar or a lion out of the hills should come forth to be his prey. And now befell a great storm, with much thunder and hail, from which the hunters sought shelter. But Aeneas and the Queen, being left of all their company, came together to the same cave, and there they plighted their troth one to another. Nor did the Queen after that make secret of her love, but called Aeneas her husband. Straightway went Rumour, and told these things through the cities of Libya. Now Rumour, men say, is the youngest daughter of Earth, a marvellous creature, moving very swiftly with feet and wings, and having many feathers upon her, and under every feather an eye, and a tongue, and a mouth, and an ear. In the night she flies between heaven and earth, and sleepeth not. And in the day she sits on some housetop or lofty tower, or spreads fear over mighty cities. And she loveth that which is false, even as she loveth that which is true. So now she went telling through Libya how Aeneas of Troy was come, and Dido was wedded to him, and how they lived careless and at ease, and thinking not of the work to which they were called. And first of all she went to Prince Iarbas, who himself had sought Dido in marriage. And Iarbas was very wroth when he heard it, and coming to the temple of Jupiter, spread his grief before the god, how that he had given a place on his coasts to this Dido, and would have taken her to wife, but that she had married a stranger from Phrygia, another Paris, whose dress and adornments were of a woman rather than of a man. And Jupiter saw that this was so, and he said to Mercury, who was his messenger, Go speak to Aeneas these words. Thus saith the king of gods and men, Is this what thy mother promised of thee, twice saving thee from the spear of the Greeks? Art thou he that shall rule Italy and its mighty men of war, and spread thy dominion to the ends of the world? If thou thyself forgettest these things, dost thou grudge to thy son the citadels of Rome? What doest thou here? Why lookest thou not to Italy? Depart, and tarry not. Then Mercury fitted the winged sandals to his feet, and took the wand with which he driveth the spirits of the dead, and came right soon to Mount Atlas, which standeth bearing the heaven on his head, and having always clouds about his top, and snow upon his shoulders, and a beard that is stiff with ice. There Mercury stood awhile. Then, as a bird which seeks its prey in the sea, shot headlong down, and came to Aeneas where he stood, with a yellow jasper in his sword hilt, and a cloak of purple shot with gold about his shoulders, and spake, Buildest thou Carthage, forgetting thine own work? The Almighty Father saith to thee, What meanest thou? Why tarriest thou here? If thou carest not for thyself, yet think of thy son, and that the fates have given to him Italy and Rome. And Aeneas saw him no more, and he stood stricken with fear and doubt. Fain would he obey the voice, and go as the gods commanded, but how should he tell this purpose to the Queen? But at the last it seemed good to him to call certain of the chiefs, as Mnestheus, and Sergestus, and Antheus, and bid them make ready the ships in silence, and gather together the people, but dissemble the cause, and he himself would watch a fitting time to speak and unfold the matter to the Queen. Yet was not Dido deceived, for love is keen of sight. Rumour also told her that they had made ready the ships for sailing. Then, flying through the city, even as one on whom has come the frenzy of Bacchus flies by night over Mount Cithaeron, she came upon Aeneas, and spake, Thoughtest thou to hide thy crime, and to depart in silence from this land? Carest not thou for her whom thou leavest to die, and hast thou no fear of winter storms that vex the sea? By all that I have done for thee and given thee, if there be yet any place for repentance, repent thee of this purpose. For thy sake I suffer the wrath of the princes of Libya and of my own people, and if thou leavest me, for what should I live? Till my brother overthrow my city, or Iarbas carry me away captive? But if I had a little Aeneas to play in my halls, I should not seem so altogether desolate. But Aeneas, fearing the words of Jupiter, stood with eyes that relented not. At the last he spake, I deny not, O Queen, the benefits that thou hast done unto me, nor ever while I live shall I forget Dido. I sought not to fly by stealth, yet did I never promise that I would abide in this place. Could I have chosen according to my will, I had built again the city of Troy where it stood. But the Gods command that I should seek Italy. Thou hast thy Carthage, why dost thou grudge Italy to us? Nor may I tarry. Night after night have I seen my father Anchises warning me in dreams. Also even now the messenger of Jupiter came to me. With these ears I heard him, and bade me depart. Then, in great wrath, with eyes askance, did Dido break forth upon him. Surely no goddess was thy mother, nor art thou come of the race of Dardanus. The rocks of Caucasus brought thee forth, and an Hyrcanian Tigris gave thee suck. For why should I dissemble? Was he moved at all by tears? Did he pity my love? Nay, the very Gods are against me. This man I took to myself when he was shipwrecked and ready to perish. I brought back his ships, his companions from destruction, and now forsooth comes the messenger of Jupiter with dreadful commands from the Gods. As for thee, I keep thee not. Go, seek thy Italy across the seas. Only, if there is any vengeance in heaven, thou wilt pay the penalty for this wrong, being wrecked on some rock in their midst. Then wilt thou call on Dido in vain. Ay, and wherever thou shalt go, I will haunt thee, and rejoice in the dwellings below to hear thy doom." Then she turned, and hasted to go into the house, but her spirit left her, so that her maidens bare her to her chamber, and laid her on her bed. Then Aeneas, though indeed he was much troubled in heart, and would fain have comforted the Queen, was obedient to the heavenly word, and departed to his ships. And the men of Troy busied themselves in making them ready for the voyage. Even as the ants spoil a great heap of corn and store it in their dwellings against winter, moving in a black line across the field, and some carry the great grains and some chide those that linger, even so did the Trojans swarm along the ways and labor at the work. But when Dido saw it, she called to Anna, her sister, and said, "Seest thou how they hasten the work along the shore? Even now the sails are ready for the winds, and the sailors have wreathed the ships with garlands, as if for departure. Go thou, the deceiver always trusted thee, and thou knowest how best to move him. Go and entreat him. I harm not him nor his people. Let him then grant me this only, let him wait for a fairer time for his journey. I ask not that he give up his purpose, only that he grant me a short breathing space, till I may learn how to bear this sorrow." And Anna hearkened to her sister, and took the message to Aeneas, yet profited nothing, for the Gods shut his ears that he should not hear. Even as an oak stands firm when the north wind would root it up from the earth, its leaves are scattered all around. Yet doth it remain firm, for its roots go down to the regions below, even as far as its branches reach to heaven. So stood Aeneas firm, and though he wept many tears, changed not his purpose. Then did Dido grow weary of her life, for when she did sacrifice, the pure water would grow black, and the wine be changed into blood. Also from the shrine of her husband, which was in the midst of her palace, was heard a voice calling her, and the owl cried aloud from her housetop. And in her dreams the cruel Aeneas seemed to drive her before him. Or she seemed to be going a long way with none to bear her company, and be seeking her own people in a land that was desert. Therefore, hiding the thing that was in her heart, she spake to her sister, saying, "I have found a way, my sister, that shall bring him back to me or set me free from him. Near the shore of the great sea, where the Ethiopians dwell, is a priestess, who guards the temple of the daughters of Hesperus, being wont to feed the dragons that kept the apples of gold. She is able by her charms to loose the heart from care or bind it, and to stay rivers also, and to turn the courses of the stars, and to call up the spirits of the dead. Do thou, therefore, for this is what the priestess commands, build a pile in the open court, and put thereon the sword which he left hanging in our chamber, and the garments he wore, and the couch on which he lay, even all that was his, so that they may perish together." And when these things were done, for Anna knew not of her purpose, and also an image of Aeneas was laid upon the pile, the priestess, with her hair unbound, called upon all the gods that dwell below, sprinkling thereon water that was drawn, she said, from the lake of Avernus, and scattering evil herbs that had been cut at the full moon with a sickle of bronze. Dido also, with one foot bare and her garments loosened, threw meal upon the fire, and called upon the gods, if haply there be any, that look upon those that love and suffer wrong. In the meantime Aeneas lay asleep in the hind part of his ship, when there appeared to him in a dream the god Mercury, even as he had seen him when he brought the commandment of Jupiter. And Mercury spake, saying, Son of Venus, canst thou sleep? Seest thou not what perils surround thee, nor hearest how the favourable west wind calls? The Queen purposes evil against thee. If thou lingerest till the morning come, thou wilt see the shore covered with them that wish thee harm. Fly then, and tarry not, for a woman is ever of many minds. Then did Aeneas in great fear start from his sleep, and call his companions, saying, Wake, and sit on the benches, and loose the sails. 'Tis a god thus bids us fly. And even as he spake he cut the cable with his sword, and all hasted to follow him, and sped over the sea. And now it was morning, and Queen Dido from her watch-tower saw the ships upon the sea. Then she smote upon her breast, and tore her hair, and cried, Shall this stranger mock us thus? Hasten to follow him. Bring down the ships from the docks. Make ready sword and fire. And this was the man who bare upon his shoulders his aged father. Why did I not tear him to pieces, and slay his companions with the sword, and serve up the young Ascanius at his meal? And if I had perished, what then? For I die to-day. O Sun, that regardest all the earth, and Juno, that carest for marriage bonds, and Hecate, queen of the dead, and ye Furies that take vengeance on evil-doers, hear me. If it be ordered that he reach this land, yet grant that he suffer many things from his enemies, and be driven from his city, and beg for help from strangers, and see his people cruelly slain with the sword. And when he shall have made peace on ill conditions, that he enjoy not long his kingdom, but die before his day, and lie unburied on the plain. And ye, men of Tyre, hate his children and his people forever. Let there be no love or peace between you. And may some avenger arise from my grave, who shall persecute the race of Dardanus with fire and sword. So shall there be war forever between him and me. Then she spake to old Barce, who had been nurse to her husband Sichaeus. Bid my sister bathe herself in water, and bring with her beasts for sacrifice, and do thou also put a garland about thy head, for I am minded to finish this sacrifice which I have begun, and to burn the image of the man of Troy. And when the old woman made haste to do her bidding, Queen Dido ran to the court where the pile was made for the burning, and mounted on the pile, and drew the sword of Aeneas from the scabbard. Then did she throw herself upon the bed, and cry, Now do I yield up my life. I have finished my course. I have built a mighty city. I have avenged my husband on him that slew him. Happy had I been, yea, too happy, had the ships of Troy never come to this land. Then she kissed the bed, and cried, Shall I die unavenged? Nevertheless let me die. The man of Troy shall see this fire from the sea whereon he journeys, and carry with him an augury of death. And when her maidens looked, lo, she had fallen upon the sword, and the blood was upon her hands. And a great cry went up through the palace, exceeding loud and bitter, even as if the enemy had taken Carthage or ancient Tyre, and the fire were mounting over the dwellings of men and of gods. And Anna her sister heard it, and rushing through the midst called her by name. O my sister, was this thy purpose? Were the pile and the sword and the fire for this? Why wouldst thou not suffer that I should die with thee? For surely, my sister, thou hast slain thyself, and me, and thy people, and thy city. But give me water, ye maidens, that I may wash her wounds, and if there be any breath left in her, we may yet stay it. Then she climbed onto the pile, and caught her sister in her arms, and sought to staunch the blood with her garments. 3 times did Dido strive to raise her eyes. 3 times did her spirit leave her. 3 times she would have raised herself upon her elbow. 3 times she fell back upon the bed, looking with wandering eyes for the light, and groaning that she yet beheld it. Then Juno, looking down from heaven, saw that her pain was long, and pitied her, and sent down Iris, her messenger, that she might loose the soul that struggled to be free. For seeing that she died not by nature, nor yet by the hand of man, but before her time and of her own madness, Queen Proserpine had not shred the ringlet from her head which she shreds from them that die. Wherefore Iris, flying down with dewy wings from heaven, with 1,000 colours about her from the light of the sun, stood above her head, and said, I give thee to death, even as I am bidden, and loose thee from thy body. Then she shred the lock, and Queen Dido gave up the ghost. End of Chapter 9. Chapters 10 and 11 of Stories from Virgil. Stories from Virgil, Chapters 10 and 11. Chapter 10. The Funeral Games of Anchises. Now were Aeneas and the men of Troy far from land. And looking back they saw a great light, nor knew what it might be. Only they feared some evil hap, knowing the rage that was in Dido's heart, and what a woman in her madness may do. And indeed the people of the queen were burning her body on the pile which she had made. But lo, the sky grew dark overhead, and there were signs as of a great storm, and Palinurus the pilot cried from the stern, where he stood with the rudder in his hand, What mean these clouds? What doest thou, Father Neptune? And he bade the men clear the decks and put out the oars to row, and shift the sails to the wind. Then he spake to Aeneas, saying, Italy we may not hope to reach with this weather. No, not though Jupiter himself promise it to us. But, if I remember me aright, the havens of Sicily are at hand, wherefore let us turn our course thither. And Aeneas answered, It is well, for I see that the winds are contrary to us, and of a truth there is no land whither I would more gladly go, seeing that my father Anchises is buried there. Then they shifted their course, and let their ships run before the wind, and so came with much speed to the land of Sicily. Now Acestes, who was king of the land, was the son of a woman of Troy, and, seeing them from a hilltop, he came to meet them, having the skin of a lion on his shoulders, and a javelin in his hand, and refreshed them with food and drink. The next day at dawn Aeneas called the men of Troy together, and spake, saying, It is a full year since we buried my father in this land, and this, if I err not, is the very day, which I will that we keep holy with festival. For such, indeed, would I do were I wandering in the wilderness of Africa, or shut up in Mycenae itself. Now therefore, seeing that we are in a land that is friendly to us, let us keep it with solemnity, and let us vow also that we will keep it year by year in the land of Italy, if so be that, having prosperous winds, we shall come thereunto. Likewise King Acestes gives to us oxen, for every ship 2, wherefore make merry and rejoice, and if the 9th day from this be fair, I will that there be games of running in a race, and of throwing the javelin, and of shooting with the bow, and of boxing, and the like. And now make ready for the sacrifice. Then he put upon his head a wreath of his mother's myrtle, and old Acestes did the like, and the boy Ascanius, and the others. Then he came near to the tomb of his father, and poured out 2 cups of wine and 2 of new milk, and scattered flowers, and said, Hail to thee, my father, whom the gods suffered not to enter with me into the land of Italy. And even as he spake there came forth a great snake from the depth of the tomb. 7 coils he had, and on his body were spots of blue and gold, and as many colours as are the colours of the rainbow in the clouds. And when Aeneas stood astonished, lo, the snake passed between the altars and tasted of the sacrifice and of that which had been poured out. And Aeneas, doubting what this might be, made fresh offerings, 2 sheep, and 2 swine, and 2 black oxen, calling on the spirit of Anchises. And the men of Troy also brought gifts, and slew oxen for sacrifice, and feasted on the flesh, roasting it with fire. And now the 9th day was come, and the sky was fair. Great was the concourse of people, for the name of King Acestes was famous in the land. Also many came to see the men of Troy, and some to strive in the games. First were the prizes put in the midst, 3-footed tables for sacrifices, and crowns, and palms, and weapons, and purple garments, and talents of gold and silver. And then the trumpet sounded, and called the people together. And first of all was the race of ships. 4 were they that strove together, Mnestheus with the Sea-horse, and Gyas with the Chimera, and Sergestus with the Centaur, and Cloanthus with the Scylla. Now far out in the sea was a rock, which is covered by the waves when the sea is rough, but stands above them if it be calm. And upon it the cormorants love to bask. Here did Aeneas set a great branch of holm oak as a goal, that the ships should round it, and so return. First they cast lots for places, and the captains stood upon the sterns, in purple and gold, and the rowers had garlands of honour about their heads, and were anointed with oil. Thus they sat upon the benches, holding the oars for a stroke, and their hearts beat high with hope. And when the trumpet sounded, each ship leapt from its place, and the sea foamed with the strokes of many oars. And all the people shouted aloud, having favour for this or for that of the captains. And first of all came Gyas with the Chimera, and next to him Cloanthus with the Scylla, for his men were indeed the stronger, but the ship more heavy. And after the Scylla came the Sea-horse and the Centaur at equal speed, now this one being foremost, and now that. But when they were come near the rock, Gyas, being in the first place, cried to his helmsman Menœtes, "Why goest thou overmuch to the right? Keep thou close to the rock. Let others choose the sea if they will." But Menœtes, fearing the hidden rocks, turned over the prow to the sea. Then a second time cried Gyas, "Make for the rock, Menœtes." And as he spake, the Scylla now came near, taking the inner course between the rock and his ship, and passed him by. Then was he greatly wroth, and wept for rage. And laying hold of Menœtes, he cast him into the sea, and himself put his hand to the helm, and turned it to the rock. But Menœtes, being an old man, and weighed down with his garments, hardly climbed upon the rock, and sat thereon. Loud laughed the men to see him fall, and swim, and vomit the salt water from his mouth. But when Mnestheus with the Sea-horse, and Sergestus with the Centaur, saw what had befallen, they hoped to pass the Chimera in the race. Eagerly strove the two together, and Mnestheus, seeing that the Centaur was yet before him in the race, ran among his men as they rowed, crying, "O my friends, whom I chose to be my comrades, quit ye like men, even as ye did in the seas of Africa and the Ionian waves. The first place I seek not, but last I would not return." And the men strove with all their might, bending forward to the stroke, and even then chance gave them that which they desired. For the Centaur, being steered too close, struck on a jutting piece of the rock, and the oars were broken, and the prow stuck fast. And while the men, with poles and the like, were thrusting her forth, Mnestheus, with the Sea-horse, had gained the open sea. And first he overtakes Gyas in the Chimera, and vanquishes it, seeing that it had lost its helmsman. And now only Cloanthus with the Scylla remains, and upon him also he presses hard. Then did all the people cry aloud, bidding Mnestheus make good speed, that he might take the first place. And the one were loth to lose that which they had gained, and the others, having done much, would do yet more, and would give their lives so that they might prevail. And now, perchance, had the two been equal for the first prize, but Cloanthus stretched forth his hands to the sea, and prayed to the gods that have power therein. "Gods of the sea, wherein I hold my course, help me now, so will I slay a milk-white bull at your altars, and cast the entrails into the waves, and pour clear wine therewith." And all the band of the Nereids heard him, and the virgin Panopea. And Portumnus himself with mighty hand drave the vessel forward swifter than the south wind or an arrow from the bow, so that it first touched the shore. Then a herald cried aloud that Cloanthus with the Scylla had won the mastery in the race, and bound a garland of bay about his head. Then to the rowers Aeneas gave 3 oxen, and jars of wine, and a talent of silver, and to the captains gifts for themselves. To the first a scarf broidered with gold, with a double border of purple, and on it was wrought the royal boy Ganymede as he hunted on Mount Ida. Eager was he, and as one that panted in the chase. But on the other side the eagle bare him away, and the old men that had charge of him stretched out their hands, and the dogs barked fiercely to the sky. And to the second Aeneas gave a hauberk of chain mail, with rings of gold, which he had himself taken from Demoleon by the river of Simois. Scarce could his 2 servants carry it, so heavy was it. Yet Demoleon had worn it, and chased the men of Troy, running at full speed. And the third prize was 2 cauldrons of bronze and cups of silver embossed. But when all had departed rejoicing with their gifts, lo, Sergestus came creeping home with his ship, which he had scarce won from the rocks, disabled, with 1 tier of rowers, even as a serpent which a wheel has maimed upon the road, which with his fore part lifts himself up and threatens, but his hind part trails upon the ground. So came Sergestus back to the haven, and to him Aeneas gave also his reward, seeing that he had brought back ship and crew, even a woman of Crete, Pholoe by name, very skilful in the work of the loom. After this Aeneas chose him out a level space, with woods about it, and having sat down in the midst upon a throne, caused it to be proclaimed that all should come who would contend together in running. And many came, both men of Troy and Sicilians. First of all, Euryalus, a comely youth, and Nisus with him, now between these 2 was great love. Next Diores of the house of Priam, then Salius and Patron, Greeks both of them, and 2 young hunters, Helymus and Panopes, who were of Sicily and of the court of Acestes, and many others also. Then said Aeneas, To each will I give 2 javelins of Crete, and an axe ornamented with silver, so that none may depart without a gift. And the first 3 shall have crowns of olive. Also to the first will I give a horse with his furniture, and to the second a quiver after the fashion of the Amazons, with arrows of Thrace, and to fasten it a belt embossed with gold, and a jewel for a clasp thereon. And let the third take this helmet of Greece, and be content. Then, when they had ranged them in a line, and the sign was given, they ran. And for a while all were near together. Then Nisus outran the rest, and next to him was Salius, but with a great space between. And the third Euryalus, and after him Helymus, and Diores pressing close upon him, even leaning over his shoulder, and ready to outrun him, had the course been longer. And now were they at the very end, when Nisus slipped in the blood of an ox which chanced to have been slain in the place, and kept not his feet, but fell, fouling himself with blood and mire. Yet did he not forget Euryalus whom he loved, but lifted himself from the ground, and tripped Salius, so that he also rolled upon the earth. So came Euryalus first to the post, and Helymus next, and Diores the third. But Salius made loud complaint to all the assembly, great and small, that he had been vanquished by fraud. Yet the people favoured Euryalus, for he was fair to look upon, and fairness ever commendeth virtue. Also Diores was urgent, who else had not won the third prize. Then said Father Aeneas, I change not the order. As each reached the goal, so shall each take his prize. Yet may I pity him who suffered wrongfully. And he gave to Salius the great skin of an African lion, with shaggy hair and claws covered with gold. Then said Nisus, Yet if thou givest such prizes to the vanquished, and hast such pity on them that fall, what hast thou for me? For surely I had won the first reward but for the ill fortune which Salius also accuseth. And he showed his face and body foul with mire. And the kindly prince laughed, and gave him a shield, the work of Didymaon. Chapter 11. The Funeral Games continued. Then did Aeneas offer rewards for boxers. For the conqueror an ox with gilded horns, for the vanquished a sword and helmet. Straightway rose up the huge Dares, who only had dared to stand in the lists against Prince Paris, and also at the funeral games of Hector had vanquished Butes, hurting him so sore that he died. This Butes was of the race of Amycus, the great boxer whom Pollux slew, and no man had stood before him. But when they saw the broad shoulders of the man and his might, there was not found one to contend with him. Therefore Dares came near to Aeneas, and laying his left hand on the horns of the ox, spake, saying, If there be no man to stand against me, why do I tarry? Bid them bring the prize. Thereupon Acestes rebuked Entellus, who sat near him upon the grass, Sufferest thou such gifts to be taken without contest? What of Eryx, thy master? What of thy fame, which hath gone through all the land of Sicily, and the spoils that hang in thy house?" Then said Entellus, "Think not, Acestes, that I am fearful, or careless of honour. But I am old, my strength is gone from me. Were I young, as that boaster yonder, I had not waited for gifts, that I should go forth to the battle." Then cast he into the midst 2 gauntlets, which Eryx the great boxer had been wont to wear, and all men marvelled to see them, so huge were they, and heavy with bull's hide, and lead, and iron. And Dares stood astonished, nor would stand against such arms. And when Aeneas regarded them, and tried their weight, Entellus spake, saying, "What had the man of Troy said had he seen the gauntlets of Hercules himself, and the dreadful battle that befell on this very shore? These gauntlets Eryx, who was my mother's son, was wont to wear. Thou seest them stained yet with blood and brains, and I also was wont to wear them in the days of my youth. But if Dares liketh them not, be it so. I put them away, and he shall do the like with his." Then he threw his garment from his shoulders, showing his mighty arms and sinews. And Aeneas gave the 2 equal gauntlets, and they stood with heads thrown back, and began the battle. Dares indeed was swifter to move, and vigorous, and young. Entellus was huge of stature, but slow and scant of breath. Many blows they aimed at each other. Many times one smote the other on his breast, or his cheek, but struck not home. And ever Entellus abode in the same place, swaying himself hither and thither with watchful eyes. But Dares was as one who besieges a city or a fort on the hills, and tries now this approach, now that, and searches out all the place, and assails it in many ways. But at the last Entellus lifted his right hand and dealt a mighty blow, which the other, foreseeing it as it fell, avoided, so that the old man wasted his strength in air, and fell with a great crash to the earth, even as falls a pine torn up by the roots on Mount Erymanthus or Mount Ida. Then the men of Troy and the men of Sicily rose up from their places to see the thing. Acestes also ran forward, and lifted up the old man from the earth, and would have comforted him. But he went back in great wrath to the battle, anger and shame stirring him up. And Dares fled before him over the plain, and he followed him, smiting him now with the right hand, now with the left, and his blows were as the hail that rattles upon the roof. But Aeneas bade him stay his anger, and spake kindly to Dares, bidding him cease from the battle. "Seest thou not that this day the victory is another's, and that the gods are against thee? Fight not against the gods." Then he commanded that the battle should cease, and the companions of Dares led him to the ships, scarcely dragging his legs, and vomiting thick blood from his mouth, and teeth in the blood. Also they took the shield and helmet which were his reward, but the palm branch and the ox they left to Entellus. Then said the conqueror, "See, son of the goddess, and ye men of Troy, what strength dwelt in this body while I was yet young, and from what a death ye have saved this Dares." Then stood he over against the ox, and smote it with his gauntlet between the horns, and it fell dead upon the earth. And Entellus cried aloud, "O Eryx, I offer thee this life for the life of Dares, being indeed the better for the worse, and I lay aside these gauntlets and this art." Next Aeneas called for those who would shoot the bow, setting up a mast from the ship of Sergestus, and fastening thereto a dove by a cord, at which mast were all to shoot. Then came the men together and cast lots, drawing them from the helmet. And first came Hippocoon, son of Hyrtacus, and next to him Mnestheus, and third Eurytion, brother of Pandarus, who broke the treaty between the men of Troy and the Greeks, shooting his arrow at Menelaus. But the lot of Acestes lingered in the helmet, and leapt not forth. Then first Hippocoon drew his bow and smote the mast, so that it shook, and the bird fluttered his wings in fear. And next Mnestheus shot his arrow, and the bird he touched not, but the string which bound it he cut. And Eurytion let fly, calling the while on his brother Pandarus, the mighty archer, to help him, and smote the dove as she flew rejoicing through the air, so that she fell to the earth and the arrow in her body. And only Acestes was left, not having whereat he should aim. Yet shot he into the air, for he would show his skill and the might of his bow. Then lo! a marvel befell, whereof in after days men knew the fulfilment. For the arrow burned as it sped through the air, leaving a line of fire, till it was altogether consumed, even as a star that shoots across the sky by night. And men marvelled to see it, and prayed to the gods that it might be well. Then great Aeneas refused not the omen, but embraced Acestes, and gave him many gifts, saying, Take these gifts, my father, for Jupiter willeth that thou shouldst have especial honour in this thing. I give thee therefore this bowl, embossed with figures of men. Old Anchises had it, and to him Cisseus, who was the father of Queen Hecuba, gave it. Also he put a crown of bay upon his head. Nor did the good Eurytion murmur, though he had slain the bird. The others also had their gifts, and were content. Not even now was the assembly dismissed, there remaining yet another sight to behold. For Ascanius and the youths that were his companions came riding on horses, and each had a wreath about his head. Each also had 2 javelins of cornel wood, and some had quivers on their shoulders, and each a collar of gold that lay on top of his breast. 3 companies there were, and to each a leader and 12 that followed. And one of the leaders was Priamus, son of Polites, called by the name of his grandfather, on a horse that was black, with pasterns of white and forehead of white. And another Aetus, whom Ascanius loved, and third, fairest of all to behold, Ascanius, on a horse of Sidon, which Queen Dido had given him. But to the rest Acestes had given horses of Sicily. And when these came forth, there was much shouting and clapping of hands, and the men of Troy rejoiced to see the lads, so like they were to the famous men their fathers. Then a signal being given, the companies were divided into bands. And these made as if they fought a battle. For sometimes they would fly, and sometimes would pursue, and sometimes would ride altogether this way or that. Many were their ways and movements, even as are the paths of the labyrinth in Crete. Swift also were they, and nimble, even as dolphins which sport among the waves in the Carpathian Sea, or African. This custom did Ascanius teach to his people, when he built the city of Alba, and the men of Alba taught it to their children after them, and mighty Rome learnt it also, and kept it in the time to come. End of chapters 10 and 11. Chapters 12 and 13 of Stories from Virgil. Stories from Virgil, chapters 12 and 13. Chapter 12. The burning of the ships, the voyage to Italy. But while the men of Troy were busy with the games, Juno prepared mischief against them in her heart, and sent down Iris, her messenger, to accomplish it. Now the women sat apart on the shore, and lifted up their voices, and bewailed the old man Anchises. But when they looked upon the sea, they lamented for themselves that they had so much travel to accomplish, for they were weary of the sea, and would fain have a city to dwell in. Which when Iris perceived, laying aside the semblance of a goddess, she took upon herself the form of Beroe, the wife of Doriclus, and went among the women of Troy, and spake, saying, O unhappy, that ye were not dragged to death by the hands of the Greeks! For now the 7th summer is come, and yet we journey over many lands and seas, and seek this Italy, which ever flies before us. Here we have friends and kindred. What forbids that we build here a city? Shall I never see the walls of another Troy, nor find Xanthus and Simois, rivers of Troy, in a strange land? Why burn we not these accursed ships that carry us hither and thither? I saw in a dream the seeress Cassandra, and she seemed to put a torch in my hand, and to say, Here seek ye for Troy, here is your home. And lo, here are altars and fire. Then she caught a brand from an altar, and cast it far from her at the ships. Then cried out Pyrgo, who had been nurse to the sons of Priam, O mothers of Troy, this is not Beroe whom ye see. Mark ye her shining eyes, and her voice, and her gait. But as for Beroe, I left her long since, sick and sore vexed that she was absent this day from our solemnity. And for a while the women stood in doubt regarding the ships, loving indeed the land whereon they stood, yet knowing that the fates called them to another. But when the goddess rose on her wings, and passed up by the path of the rainbow into the heavens, then a great fury fell upon them, so that they caught brands from the altars and set fire to the ships. And straightway the flames ran over the benches and the oars and the stems of painted pine. Then ran Eumelus to the men of Troy, where they sat at the games, and told them how that the ships were burning. Also they themselves saw the black cloud of smoke rolling before the wind. And Ascanius, in the midst of his horsemanship, heard the matter, and sped to the camp. And being come, he cried aloud, "What madness is this? Ye burn not the camp of the Greeks, ye burn our own hopes. Lo, I am your Ascanius." And he threw his helmet on the ground, that they should know him. Also Aeneas and the men of Troy made haste to come up. Then were the women ashamed of that which they had done, and would have hidden themselves, their fury being past. But not the more did the flame cease to devour the ships, and they who would have quenched the fire availed nothing. Then the pious Aeneas rent his garments, and prayed to the gods, saying, "O Jupiter, if thou dost not altogether hate us, save our ships from the fire, and suffer us not to perish utterly. But if thou art angry, and so it seem good to thee, slay me with thy thunderbolt." And even as he spake, there came up a great storm from the south, with thunder and lightning and a great rain, and the fire was quenched. But of the ships 4 were burnt altogether. Now Aeneas was sore troubled at these things, and doubted much whether he should still abide in the land of Sicily, nor heed the fates, or should yet follow after Italy. Then the old man, Naut, the priest of Pallas, in whom more than all men besides dwelt the wisdom of the goddess, spake to him, saying, "Son of the goddess, it must needs be that we go whither the gods call us. Yet mayest thou devise something for this present necessity, taking counsel with King Acestes, seeing that he also is a son of Troy. For now, 4 ships being burned, the people are over many for such as there are left to us. Some also faint at this thing that we purpose. Also there are old men and women, wearied of the sea, and the weak, and the fearful. Suffer then that he take these to himself to be his people, and build a city for them, and call it Acesta, after his own name." And while Aeneas thought on these things, he slept. And lo, in his dream there came to him his father Anchises, and spake, saying, "I come, my son, at the bidding of Jupiter. Take thou heed to the counsel which Naut giveth thee, for it is good. Let the chosen youth of thy people go with thee, for thou hast a mighty people and a fierce in Latium with whom to do battle. But first must thou seek the dwellings of the dead, and hold converse with me. For indeed I dwell not in Tartarus with the evildoers, but in Elysium with the companies of the blessed. And thither shall the Sibyl guide thee, and thou shalt learn all that shall befall thee and thy people after this. And now farewell, for the morning cometh, and I must depart." And the spirit of Anchises vanished out of his sight, even as smoke into air, nor heeded him when he would have stayed it. And Aeneas arose and did sacrifice to the household gods and to Vesta. Then he took counsel with his companions and with Acestes, and Acestes hearkened to his words. And they separated such as would tarry in the place, both men and women. But the others, few in number indeed, but strong and of a good courage, made ready the ships to depart. And in the meantime Aeneas marked the boundaries of the city with a plowshare, and Acestes set it in order with laws and government. Also on the mountain of Eryx they built a temple to Venus, and they consecrated a grove and a priest at the tomb of Anchises. Then for 9 days they feasted, and after, for it was fine weather, and the south wind blew softly, they made ready to sail. There was then a great weeping and embracing on the shore, and now were all fain to go, willing not to be parted from kindred and friends. But Aeneas comforted them, and, having sacrificed 3 calves to Eryx, and a lamb to the storms, so departed. And Venus spake to Neptune, saying, "It troubleth me sore that Juno will not lay aside her wrath. For the city of Troy she overthrew, and it being overthrown, she pursueth them that are left with hatred that cannot be appeased. And now I fear me much what she may do. For she stirred up Aeolus, that he loosed all the winds against them. And even now she put into the hearts of the women this great madness, that they should burn the ships. Wherefore I pray thee that thou shouldest give them now a safe voyage to Italy. And the King of the Sea made answer, Thou doest well to put thy trust in my realms and me. For both have I stilled the madness of the sea, and also on the land have I taken thought for thy Aeneas. Mindest thou not the day when Achilles pursued the men of Troy to their city, and filled the rivers with dead bodies, so that Xanthus could not make his way to the sea, and how Aeneas would have met him in battle, being weaker, and I snatched him away in a cloud, yea, though I desired from my heart to overthrow the city of Troy, even the works of my own hands? Fear not, therefore. He shall come safe to the haven of Avernus. One only of his company must perish, even one life for many. Then did he pass over the sea in his chariot, and there was a great calm as he went, and the clouds flew from the sky, and the great beasts of the sea went with him. Also the gods and goddesses of the sea, as Glaucus and Palaemon, and the company of the Tritons, and Thetis, and the virgin Panopea. And the men of Troy loosed the sheets, and spread all the sails to the wind. And the foremost of the fleet was the ship of Aeneas, Palinurus being the helmsman. And in the night sleep came down from the sky, and taking the shape of Phorbas, spake to Palinurus, saying, All things are quiet. Rest awhile. It is the hour of rest. I will take thy office for thee. But Palinurus, scarce lifting his eyes, made answer, Dost thou bid me trust calm seas and gentle winds? Not so. Too often have I been deceived. Nor did he loose his hold upon the rudder, or take his eyes from the stars. Then did sleep wave over him a bough that had been dipped in the water of Lethe, and when he slept, as he must needs do, thrust him into the sea and a portion of the rudder with him, and he fell, calling vainly for help. And when the ships were close to the rocks of the Sirens, which in old time were white with bones of men, but now with spray and broken waves, Aeneas perceived that the ship strayed from its course. For indeed, seeing that the helmsman had perished, the winds and the waves had their will of it. Then did he lay hold on the rudder himself, but it grieved him much that such mischance had befallen his friend. Chapter 13. The Sibyl. So Aeneas came to the land of Italy, nigh unto Cumae, which was the dwelling place of the Sibyl. And the men turned the forepart of the ships to the sea, and made them fast with anchors. Then they leapt forth upon the shore, and kindled a fire, and some cut wood in the forest, or fetched water from the stream. But Aeneas went up to the great cave of the Sibyl, where, by the inspiration of Apollo, she foretelleth things to come. Now the temple was a marvellous place to look upon, for Daedalus, when he fled from Minos, king of Crete, flying through the air upon wings, came northwards to the land of Cumae, and tarried there. Also he dedicated his wings in the temple. On the doors thereof was set forth, graven in stone, the death of Androgeos, and the men of Attica choosing by lot 7 of their children, who should be given as a ransom yearly. And rising from the sea upon the other side, the land of Crete. Likewise the labyrinth was there, and its winding ways. But Icarus they saw not, for when his father would have wrought the manner of his death in gold, his hands failed him. Twice he strove, and twice they failed. And when Aeneas would have looked further, the priestess said, Linger not with these things, but slay forthwith 7 bullocks from the herd, and 7 sheep duly chosen out of the flock. And when they came to the cave, now there are 100 doors, and a voice cometh forth from each, the Sibyl cried, It is time. Lo, the god, the god. And even as she spake, her look was changed, and the colour of her face. Also her hair was loosened, and her breast panted, and she waxed greater than is the stature of a man. Then she cried, Delayest thou to pray, Aeneas of Troy? Delayest thou? For the doors open not but to prayer. Nor said she more. Then Aeneas prayed, saying, O Phœbus, who didst always pity the sorrows of Troy, and didst guide the arrow of Paris that it slew the great Achilles, I have followed thy bidding, journeying over many lands, and now I lay hold on this shore of Italy, which ever seemed to fly before me. Grant thou that our ill fortune follow us no more, and all ye gods and goddesses who loved not Troy, be merciful to us, and thou, O prophetess, give, if it may be, such answer as I would hear. So will I and my people honor thee for ever. And write it not, I pray thee, upon leaves, lest the winds carry them away, but speak with thy voice." And for a while the prophetess strove against the spirit, but at the last it mastered her, and the doors flew open, and she spake, saying, "The perils of the sea thou hast escaped, but there await thee yet worse perils upon the land. The men of Troy shall come to the kingdom of Lavinium. Fear not for that. Yet will they fain not have come. I see battles, and the Tiber foaming with blood, and a new Xanthus, and Simois, and another Achilles, himself also goddess-born. Juno also shall be ever against thee, and thou shalt be a suppliant to many cities, and the cause of all these woes shall be again a woman. Only yield not thou, but go ever more boldly when occasion shall serve. Little thinkest thou that thy first succor shall be from a city of the Greeks." And when she had ended these words, Aeneas made answer, "O lady, no toil or peril shall take me unawares, for I have thought over all things in my heart. But one thing I ask of thee. Here is the door of the dwellings of the dead. Fain would I pass thereby, that I may visit my father. I carried him on my shoulders out of the fires of Troy, and with me he endured many things by land and sea, more than befitted his old age. Likewise he bade me ask this boon of thee. Do thou, therefore, pity both father and son, for thou hast the power, if only thou wilt. Did not Orpheus bring back his wife from the dead, having his harp only? Also Pollux goeth many times this same path, redeeming his brother from death. And why should I tell of Theseus and Hercules? And I also am of the lineage of Jupiter." Then the Sibyl spake, saying, "Son of Anchises, it is easy to go down to hell. The door is open day and night. But to return, and struggle to the upper air, that is the labor. Few only have done it, and these of the lineage of the gods and dear to Jupiter. Yet if thou wilt attempt it, hearken unto me. There lieth hid in the forest a bough of gold, which is sacred to the Queen of Hell. Nor may any man go on this journey till he have plucked it, for the Queen will have it as a gift for herself. And when the bough is plucked, there ever groweth another. And if it be the pleasure of the gods that thou go, it will yield to thy hand. But know that one of thy companions lieth dead upon the shore. First must thou bury him, and after offer due sacrifice, even black sheep. So shalt thou approach the dwellings of the dead." Then Aeneas departed from the cave, and Achates went with him, and much they wondered who it might be that was dead. And when they came to the shore, lo, Maecenas lay there, than whom no man was more skilful to call men to battle with the voice of the trumpet. Hector's companion he had been in old time, and then followed Aeneas, and now, blowing his trumpet on the shore, he had challenged the gods of the sea to compare with him. Wherefore a Triton caught him and plunged him into the sea, so that he died. Then did Aeneas and his companions prepare for the burial, cutting ilex and oak and mountain ash from the wood. But when Aeneas beheld the forest, how vast it was, he said, "Now may the gods grant that in this great forest the bough of gold discover itself." And as he spake, lo, 2 doves flew before his face, and settled on the grass. And he knew them to be the birds of his mother, and cried, saying, "Guide me now to the bough of gold, and thou, my mother, help me as before." Then the birds flew so that he could still see them with his eyes, and he followed after them. But when they came to the mouth of Avernus, they sat both of them on the tree, and lo, the bough of gold glittered among the branches and rustled in the wind. Right gladly did Aeneas break it off, and carry it to the dwelling of the Sibyl. In the meantime the men of Troy made a great burial for Maecenas on the shore, building a pile of wood, and washing and anointing the body. Also they laid the body on a bier, and on it the garments which he had worn being yet alive. Then others, with faces turned away, held a torch to the wood, whereon also were burned incense and offerings of oil. And when the burning was ended, they quenched the ashes with wine. And Aeneas gathered the bones into an urn of bronze, and purified the people, sprinkling them with water with a bough of an olive tree. Then Aeneas made a great mound, and put thereon the trumpet of the man and his bow. And the mountain is called Mycenas, after him, to this day. But when the burial was ended, he did as the Sibyl had commanded. A great cavern there is, from which cometh so evil a stench that no bird may fly across. There they brought 4 black oxen, and the priestess poured wine upon their heads, and cut hairs from between the horns. And when they had burned these, they slew the oxen, holding dishes for the blood. And Aeneas offered a black lamb to the Furies, and a barren heifer to the Queen of Hell, smiting them with his sword. Then they burned the entrails with fire, pouring oil upon them. Then did the ground give a hollow sound beneath them, and the dogs howled, for the goddess was at hand. And the priestess cried, Go ye who may not take part in this matter. And thou, Aeneas, draw thy sword from its sheath, and follow. Now hast thou need of all thy strength and courage. Then she plunged into the cave, and Aeneas went with her. End of chapters 12 and 13. Chapter 14 of Stories from Virgil. Stories from Virgil, Chapter 14. The Dwellings of the Dead. So they went together through the land of shadows, like unto men who walk through a wood in a doubtful light, when the moon indeed hath risen, but there are clouds over the sky. And first they came to where in front of the gates of hell dwell sorrow and remorse, and pale disease, and fear, and hunger, that tempteth men to sin, and want, and death, and toil, and slumber, that is death's kinsman, and deadly war. Also they saw the chambers of the Furies, and discord, whose hair is of snakes that drip with blood. And in this region there is an ancient elm, in the boughs whereof dwell all manner of dreams, and shapes of evil monsters, as many as have been, such as were the centaurs, half man, half horse, and Briareus with the 100 hands, and others also. These Aeneas, when he saw them, sought to slay, rushing upon them with the sword, but his guide warned him that they were shadows only. After this they came to the river of hell, whereon plies the boatman Charon. A long white beard hath he, and unkempt, and his eyes are fixed in a fiery stare, and a scarf is knotted upon his shoulder, as is a pilot's wont. An old man he seemeth to be, but hale and ruddy. Now there was ever rushing to the bank a great crowd, wives and mothers and valiant men of war, boys and girls dead before they were given in marriage, and young men laid on the funeral pile before their parents' eyes. Thick they were as the leaves that fall to the earth at the first frost of autumn, or as the swallows when they gather themselves together, making ready to fly across the sea to the lands of the sun. And of these Charon would take some into his boat, but others he would forbid, and drive from the shore. This, when Aeneas saw, he marvelled, and said, O lady, what meaneth this concourse at the river? What seek these souls? Why be some driven from the bank, and some ferried across? And the Sibyl made answer, This river that thou seest is the Styx, by which the gods in heaven swear, and fear to break their oath. Those whom thou seest to be driven from the bank are such as have lacked burial, but those who are ferried across have been buried duly. For none pass this stream till their bodies have been laid in the grave, otherwise they wander for 100 years, and so at last may cross over. Much did Aeneas pity their ill fortune, and the more when he beheld Orontes and his Lycians, whom the sea had swallowed up alive before his eyes. Here likewise there met him his pilot Palinurus, to whom when he saw him, for indeed he scarce could see him in the darkness, he said, What god took thee from us and drowned thee in the sea? Surely in this one matter Apollo hath deceived me, saying that thou shouldst escape the sea, and come to the land of Italy. Then answered Palinurus, Not so, great Aeneas, for indeed to the land of Italy I came. 3 nights the south wind carried me over the sea, and on the 4th day I saw the land of Italy from the top of a wave. And when I swam to the shore, and was now clinging to the rocks, my garments being heavy with water, the savage people came upon me, and took me for a prey, and slew me. And now the winds and waves bear me about as they will. Wherefore, I pray thee, by thy father, and Iülus, the hope of thy house, that thou deliver me from these woes. Go, therefore, I pray thee, to the haven of Velia, and cast earth upon me for burial, or give me now thy hand, and take me with thee across this river." Then said the priestess, "O Palinurus, what madness is this? Wilt thou without due burial cross the river, and look upon the awful faces of the Furies? Think not that the fates can be changed by prayers. Yet hear this, and be comforted. They that slew thee, being sore troubled by many plagues, shall make due expiation to thee, and build a tomb, and make offerings thereon year by year, and the place where they slew thee shall be called after thy name." Then he took comfort, and departed. But when they came near to the river, the boatman beheld them, and cried, "Stay thou, whoever thou art, that comest armed to this river, and tell me what thou seekest. This is the land of shadows, of sleep, and of night. The living may not be ferried in this boat. An evil day it was when I carried Hercules and Theseus and Pirithoeus, though they were children of the Gods. For Hercules chained the watch-dog of hell, and dragged him trembling from his master's seat. And Theseus and his friend sought to carry away the queen even from the chamber of her husband." Then the Sibyl made answer, "Be not troubled. We came not hither with evil thoughts. Let the watch-dog of hell make the pale ghosts afraid. Let your queen abide in her husband's palace. We will not harm them. Aeneas of Troy cometh down to hell that he may speak with his father. And if thou takest no account of such piety, yet thou wilt know this token." And she showed him the bough of gold. And when he saw it, he laid aside his anger, rejoicing to behold, now after many years, the marvellous gift. Then he brought near his boat to the bank, and drave out the souls that were therein, and took on board Aeneas and the priestess. Much did it groan with the weight, and the water poured apace through the seams thereof, yet did they come safe across. Then they saw Cerberus, the watch-dog, in his cave, and to him the Sibyl gave a cake of honey and poppy seed, causing sleep. And this he swallowed, opening wide his 3 ravenous mouths, and straightway stretched himself out asleep across the cave. After this they heard a great wailing of infants, even the voices of such as are taken away before they have had lot or part in life. And near to these were such as have died by false accusation. Yet lack they not justice, for Minos trieth their cause, and yet beyond, they that, being guiltless, have laid hands upon themselves. Fain would they now endure hardships, being yet alive, but may not, for the river keeps them in with its unlovely stream as a prison. Not far from these are the mourning fields, where dwell the souls of those that have died of love, as Procris, whom Cephalus slew in error, and Laodamia, who died of grief for her husband. And among these was Dido, fresh from the wound wherewith she slew herself. And when Aeneas saw her darkly through the shadows, even as one who sees, or thinketh that he sees, the new moon lately risen, he wept, and said, "O Dido, it was truth then that they told me, saying that thou hadst slain thyself with the sword. Tell me, was I the cause of thy death? Loth was I, O Queen, I swear by all that is most holy in heaven or hell, to leave thy land. But the Gods, at whose bidding I come hither this day, constrained me. Nor did I think that thou wouldst take such sorrow from my departure. But stay, depart not, for never again may I speak to thee but this once only." So he spake, and would fain have appeased her wrath, but she cast her eyes to the ground, and her heart was hard against him, even as a rock. And she departed into a grove that was hard by, wherein was her first husband, Sychaeus, who loved her even as he was loved. After this they came to the land where the heroes dwell, and there they saw Tydeus, who died before Thebes, and Adrastus, and also many men of Troy, as the 3 sons of Antenor, and Idaeus, who was the armor-bearer of King Priam, and bare the arms and drave the chariot yet. All these gathered about him, and would fain know wherefore he had come. But when the hosts of Agamemnon saw his shining arms through the darkness, they fled, as in old days they had fled to the ships. And some would have cried aloud, but could not, so thin are the voices of the dead. Among these he saw Deiphobus, son of Priam. Cruelly mangled was he, for his hands had been cut off, and his ears and his nostrils likewise. Scarce did Aeneas know him, and he himself in shame would have hidden his wounds. But the son of Anchises spake to him, saying, "Who hath dealt so foully with thee, great Deiphobus? Men told me that on the last night of Troy thou didst fall dead on a heap of Greeks whom thou hadst slain. Wherefore I built thee a tomb by the sea, and thrice called aloud thy name. But thee I found not, that I might lay thee therein." Then Deiphobus made answer, "Thou hast left nothing undone, but hast paid me all due honour. But my ill fate and the accursed wickedness of the Spartan woman have destroyed me. How we spent that last night in idle rejoicings thou knowest. And she, while the women of Troy danced before the Gods, stood holding a torch on the citadel, as though she were their leader. Yet in truth she called therewith the Greeks from Tenedos. But I lay overcome with weariness in my chamber. Then did she, a noble wife, forsooth, take all the arms out of the house, and my trusty sword also from under my head, and after brought thereunto Menelaus, so hoping to do away her sin against him, and Ulysses also, always ready with evil counsels. What need of more? May the Gods do so and more also to them. But tell me, why hast thou come hither?" And it was now past noonday, and the two had spent in talk all the allotted time. Therefore the Sibyl spake, "Night cometh, Aeneas, and we waste the day in tears. Lo, here are two roads. This on the right hand leadeth to the palace of Pluto and to the Elysian plains, and that on the left to Tartarus, the abode of the wicked." And Deiphobus answered, "Be not wroth, great priestess. I depart to my own place. Do thou, my friend, go on and prosper." But as Aeneas looked round, he saw a great building, and a threefold wall about it, and round the wall a river of fire. Great gates there were, and a tower of brass, and the Fury Tisiphone sat as warder. Also he heard the sound of those that smote upon an anvil, and the clanking of chains. And he stood, and said, "What mean these things that I see and hear?" Then the Sibyl made answer, "The foot of the righteous may not pass that threshold. But when the Queen of Hell gave me this office, she herself led me through the place, and told me all. There sits Rhadamanthus the Cretan, and judges the dead. And them that be condemned Tisiphone taketh, and the gate which thou seest openeth to receive them. And within is a great pit, and the depth thereof is as the height of heaven. Herein lie the Titans, the sons of earth, whom Jupiter smote with the thunder. And herein the sons of Aeolus, who strove to thrust the Gods from heaven, and Salmoneus, who would have mocked the thunder of Jupiter, riding in his chariot through the cities of Elis, and shaking a torch, and giving himself out to be a god. But the lightning smote him in his pride. Also I saw Tityus, spread over 9 acres of ground, and the vulture feeding on his heart. And over some hangs a great stone ready to fall, and some sit at the banquet. But when they would eat, the Fury at their side forbids, and rises and shakes her torch and thunders in their ears. These are they who, while they were yet alive, hated their brothers, or struck father or mother, or deceived one that trusted to them, or kept their riches for themselves, nor cared for those of their own household. A great multitude are they, or stirred up civil strife. And of these some roll a great stone and cease not, and some are bound to wheels, and some sit for ever, crying, "Learn to do righteousness, and to fear the Gods." And when the priestess had finished these words, they hastened on their way, and after a while she said, "Lo, here is the palace which the Cyclopes built for Pluto and the Queen of Hell. Here must we offer the gift of the bow of gold." And this being accomplished, they came to the dwellings of the righteous. Here are green spaces with woods about them, and the light of their heaven is fuller and brighter than that which men behold. Another sun they have, and other stars. Some of them contend together in wrestling and running, and some dance in measure, singing the while a pleasant song. And Orpheus, clad in a long robe, makes music, touching his harp, now with his fingers and now with an ivory bow. Here did Aeneas marvel to see the mighty men of old, such as were Ilus and Dardanus, builder of Troy. Their spears stood fixed in the earth, and their horses fed about the plain. For they loved spear and chariot and horses, even as they loved them upon earth. And others sat and feasted, sitting on the grass in a sweet-smelling grove of bay, whence flows the river which men upon the earth called the Po. Here were they who had died for their country, and holy priests, and poets who had uttered nothing base, and such as had found out witty inventions, or had done great good to men. All these had snow-white garlands on their heads. Then spake the Sibyl to Mucius, who stood in the midst, surpassing them all in stature. Tell me, happy souls, where shall we find Anchises? And Mucius answered, We have no certain dwelling place, but climb this hill, and ye can see the whole plain below, and doubtless him whom you seek. Then they beheld Anchises where he sat in a green valley, regarding the spirits of those who should be born in aftertime of his race. And when he beheld Aeneas coming, he stretched out his hands, and cried, Comest thou, my son? Hast thou won thy way hither to me? Even so I thought that it would be, and lo, my hope hath not failed me. And Aeneas made answer, Yea, I have come a long way to see thee, even as thy spirit bade me, and now let me embrace thee with my arms. But when he would have embraced him, it was as if he clasped the air. Then Aeneas looked, and beheld a river, and a great company of souls thereby, thick as the bees on a calm summer day in a garden of lilies. And when he would know the meaning of the concourse, Anchises said, These are souls which have yet to live again in a mortal body, and they are constrained to drink of the water of forgetfulness. And Aeneas said, Nay, my father, can any desire to take again upon them the body of death? Then Anchises made reply, Listen, my son, and I will tell thee all. There is one soul in heaven and earth, and the stars, and the shining orb of the moon, and the great sun himself, from which soul also cometh the life of man and of beast, and of the birds of the air, and of the fishes of the sea. And this soul is of a divine nature, but the mortal body maketh it slow and dull. Hence come fear and desire, and grief and joy, so that, being as it were shut in a prison, the spirit beholdeth not any more the light that is without. And when the mortal life is ended, yet are not men quit of all the evils of the body, seeing that these must needs be put away in many marvellous ways. For some are hung up to the winds, and with some their wickedness is washed out by water, or burnt out with fire. But a ghostly pain we all endure. Then we that are found worthy are sent into Elysium, and the plains of the blest. And when, after many days, the soul is wholly pure, it is called to the river of forgetfulness, that it may drink thereof, and so return to the world that is above. Then he led Aeneas and the Sibyl to a hill, whence they could see the whole company, and regard their faces as they came. And he said, Come, and I will show thee them that shall come after thee. That youth who leans upon a pointless spear is Silvius, thy youngest child, whom Lavinia shall bear to thee in thy old age. He shall reign in Alba, and shall be the father of kings. And many other kings are there, who shall build cities great and famous. Lo, there is Romulus, whom Ilia shall bear to Mars. He shall build Rome, whose empire shall reach to the ends of the earth, and its glory to the heaven. Seest thou him with the olive crown about his head and the white beard? That is he who shall first give laws to Rome. And next to him is Tullus, the warrior. And there are the Tarquins, and Brutus, who shall set the people free, ay, and shall slay his own sons when they would be false to their country. See also the Decii, and Torquatus with the cruel axe, and Camillus winning back the standards of Rome. There standeth one who shall subdue Corinth, and there another who shall avenge the blood of Troy upon the race of Achilles. There, too, thou mayest see the Scipios, thunderbolts of war, whom the land of Africa shall fear. And there Regulus, busy in the furrows, and there the Fabii, chiefly him, greatest of the name, who shall save thy country by wise delay. Such, my son, shall be thy children's children. Others with softer touch shall carve the face of man in marble, or mould the bronze. Some more skilfully shall plead, or map the skies, or tell the rising of the stars. 'Tis thine, man of Rome, to subdue the world. This is thy work, to set the rule of peace over the vanquished, to spare the humble, and to subdue the proud. Then he spake again, Regard him who is the first of all the company of conquerors. He is Marcellus. He shall save the state in the day of trouble, and put to flight Carthaginian and Gaul. Then said Aeneas, for he chanced to see by his side a youth clad in shining armour, and very fair to look upon, but sad, and with downcast eyes, Tell me, father, who is this? How noble is he! What a company is about him! But there is a shadow of darkness round his head. And Anchises made answer, O my son, seek not to know the greatest sorrow that shall befall thy children after thee. This youth the fates shall only show for a brief space to man. Rome would seem too mighty to the gods should he but live. What mourning shall there be for him? What a funeral shalt thou see, O river of Tiber, as thou flowest by the new-made tomb? No youth of the race of Troy shall promise so much as he. Alas, for his righteousness, and truth, and valor unsurpassed! O luckless boy, if thou canst haply break thy evil doom, thou shalt be a Marcellus. Give handfuls of lilies. I will scatter the bright flowers, and pay the idle honors to my grandson's shade. Thus did Anchises show his son things to be, and kindled his soul with desire of glory. Also he showed him what wars he must wage, and how he should endure, or, if it might be, avoid the evils to come. There are two gates of sleep, of horn the one, by which true dreams go forth, of ivory the other, by which the false. Then did Anchises send forth his son and the Sibyl by the ivory gate. And Aeneas returned to the ships, and making sail came to the cape which was afterwards called Caieta. End of chapter 14. Chapters 15 and 16 of Stories from Virgil. Stories from Virgil, chapters 15 and 16. Chapter 15. King Latinus. While they tarried at Cumae, Caieta, who was the nurse of Aeneas, died and was buried, and they called the cape after her name. And afterwards they set sail, and passed by the island wherein dwelt Circe, who is the daughter of the sun. Pleasantly doth she sing, sitting at the loom, and burneth torches of sweet-smelling cedar, to give her light by night. And round about her dwelling you may hear the growling of lions and wild boars and bears and wolves, which are men whom the goddess with her enchantments hath changed into the shapes of beasts. But Neptune would not that the men of Troy, being fearers of the gods, should suffer such things. Therefore did he send them favourable winds, so that they passed quickly by that land. Now when it was dawn, the wind being now lulled, they came to a great wood upon the shore, and in the midst of the wood the river Tiber, yellow with much abundance of sand, flowing into the sea. And on the shore and in the wood were many birds. Thither the men of Troy brought their ships safe to land. Of this country Latinus was king, who was the son of Faunus, who was the son of Picus, who was the son of Saturn. And King Latinus had not a son, but a daughter only, Lavinia by name, who was now of an age to be married. Many chiefs of Latium, and of all Italy, desired to have her to wife, of whom the first was Turnus, a very comely youth, and of a royal house. Now the queen, the mother of the Virgin, loved him, and would fain have married her daughter to him, but the gods hindered the marriage with ill omens and marvels. In the midst of the palace was a great bay-tree, which the king who builded the house had dedicated to Phoebus. On this there lighted a great swarm of bees, and hung like unto a cluster of grapes from a bough thereof. And the seers, beholding the thing, cried, There cometh a stranger who shall be husband to Lavinia, and a strange people who shall bear rule in this place. Also, when Lavinia lighted the fire upon the altar, standing by her father, a flame leapt therefrom upon her hair, and burned the ornament that was upon her head, and the crown of jewels and gold, and spread with smoke and fire over the whole palace. Whereupon the prophets spake, saying, The Virgin indeed shall be famous and great, but there cometh a dreadful war upon her people. And King Latinus, fearing what these things might mean, inquired of the oracle of Faunus his father, which is by the grove of Albunia. Now the custom is that the priest offereth sacrifice in the grove, and lieth down to sleep on the skins of the sheep that he hath slain. And it cometh to pass that he seeth visions in the night, and heareth the voice of the gods. So King Latinus, being himself a priest, made a great sacrifice, even of 100 sheep, and lay down to sleep upon the skins thereof. And when he was laid down, straightway there came a voice from the grove, saying, Seek not, my son, to marry thy daughter to a chief of this land. There shall come a son-in-law from beyond the sea, who shall exalt our name from one end of heaven to the other. Nor did the king hide these things, but noised them abroad, and the fame thereof was great in these days when Aeneas and his company came to the land of Italy. Now it so chanced that Aeneas and Iülus his son, and others of the princes, sat down to eat under a tree, and they had platters of dough whereon to eat their meat. And when they had ended, and were not satisfied, they ate their platters also, not thinking what they did. Then Iülus, making sport, said, What, do we eat even our tables? And Aeneas was right glad to hear this thing, and embraced the boy, and said, How know I that we are come to the land which the gods have promised to me and my people, that they would give us? For my father Anchises spake to me, saying, My son, when thou shalt come to a land that thou knowest not, and hunger shall constrain thee to eat thy tables, then know that thou hast found thee a home. Now therefore, seeing that these things have an accomplishment, let us pour out libations to Jupiter, and make our prayers also to my father Anchises, and make merry, and in the morning we will search out the country, and see who they be that dwell herein. Then he bound a garland of leaves about his head, and made his prayers to Mother Earth, and to the gods of the land, of whom indeed he knew not who they were, and to Father Jupiter, and to the other gods also. And when he had ended his prayer, Jupiter thundered thrice from the sky. Then it was noised abroad among the men of Troy that now indeed were they come to the land where they should build them a city. And they ate and drank and made merry. The next day those who should search out the country went forth, and when it was told Aeneas, saying that this river was the Tiber, and that the people who dwelt in the land were the Latins, valiant men of war, he chose out 100 men who should go, with crowns of olive upon their heads, to the city of the king, having also gifts in their hands, and should pray that there might be peace between the men of Troy and his people. And the men made haste to depart, and in the meanwhile Aeneas marked out for himself a camp, and bade that they should make a rampart and a ditch. Now when they that were sent came nigh to the city, they saw the young men in the plain that was before it, riding upon horses and driving chariots. Others shot with the bow, or cast javelins, and some contended in running or boxing. And one rode on horseback, and told the king, saying that certain men in strange raiment were come. Then the king commanded that they should be brought into the palace, and sat upon the throne of his fathers, and gave audience to them. Now the palace stood on the hill that was in the midst of the city, where King Picus had builded it, having woods about it very sacred. Here did the kings first receive the sceptre, that they should bear rule over the people. A senate house also it was, and a banqueting house, where the princes sat feasting. Very great was it, and magnificent, having 100 pillars. And in the halls were the statues of ancient kings, carven in cedar, even Italus, and Sabinus the vine-dresser, and Father Saturn, and Janus with the 2 faces. Also on the wall hung trophies of war, chariots, and battle-axes, and helmets, and javelins, and the beaks of ships. And sitting on a throne was the image of King Picus, clad in royal apparel, bearing a shield on his left arm. But the king himself, his wife Circe, had changed into a bird. And King Latinus spake, saying, Tell me, men of Troy, for I know who you are, what seek ye? For what cause are ye come to the land of Italy? Have ye gone astray in your journey? Or have the storms driven you out of the way, as ofttimes befalleth men that sail upon the sea? Ye are welcome. And know that we be of the race of Saturn, who do righteously, not by constraint, but of our own will. From hence also, even from Corythus, which is a city of the Etrurians, went forth Dardanus, and abode in the land of Troy. Then Ilioneus made answer, saying, Great king, we have not gone astray of our journey, nor have storms driven us out of the way. Of set purpose are we come to this land, for we were driven away by ill fortune from our country, of which things we doubt not, O king, that thou knowest the certainty. For who is there under the whole heaven who knoweth not what a storm of destruction came forth from the land of Greece, and overthrew the great city of Troy, Europe and Asia setting themselves in arms against each other? And now are we come to ask for a parcel of land whereon we may dwell, and for air and water, which indeed are common to all men. Nor shall we do dishonour to this realm, nor be unthankful for these benefits. And be sure, O king, that it will not repent thee that thou hast received us. For indeed many nations and lands would fain have joined us to themselves, But the gods laid a command upon us that we should come to this country of Italy. For indeed, as thou sayest, Dardanus came forth from hence, and thither his children, Apollo bidding them, would return. And now, behold, Aeneas sends thee these gifts of the things which remain to us of the riches which we had aforetime. This sceptre King Priam held when he did justice among his people. Here is a crown also, and garments which the women of Troy have worked with their hands." Then for a while King Latinus kept silence, fixing his eyes upon the ground. Deeply did he ponder in his heart upon the marriage of his daughter, and upon the oracles of Faunus his father, whether indeed this stranger that was now come to his land might haply be the son-in-law of whom the prophets had spoken. At the last he spake, saying, "May the gods prosper this matter between you and me. We grant, men of Troy, that which ye ask. Also we regard these your gifts. Know ye that while we reign in this land ye shall not want for riches, even unto the measure of the riches of Troy. And for your king, Aeneas, if he desire, as ye say, to join himself with us, let him come and look upon us, face to face, and also take ye back this message to your king. I have a daughter, whom the gods suffer me not to marry to a husband of this land. For they say that there shall come a stranger, who shall be my son-in-law, and that from his loins shall come forth those who shall raise our name even unto the stars." Then the king commanded that they should bring forth horses from the stalls. Now there stood in the stalls 300 horses, very fleet of foot, and of these they brought forth 100, one for each man of Troy. And they were decked with trappings of purple, and champed on bits of gold. And for Aeneas himself he sent a chariot, and 2 horses breathing fire from their nostrils, which were of the breed of the horses of the sun. So the men of Troy went back riding on horses, and took to Aeneas the gifts and the message of peace. Chapter 16. The Wrath of Juno. Now Juno beheld how the men of Troy were come to the land of Italy, and were now building them houses to dwell in. And a great wrath came into her heart, and she spake to herself, saying, Of a truth, this accursed race hath vanquished me, for the flames of Troy burned them not, neither hath the sea devoured them. And lo, they are come to the place where they would be, even to the river of Tiber. Yet could Mars destroy the whole nation of the Lapithae, when he was wroth with them. And Jupiter suffered Diana to prevail against the land of Calydon. Yet had not the Lapithae or Calydon done so great wickedness as hath this nation of Troy. And I, who am the wife of Jupiter, am vanquished by Aeneas. Yet have I means yet remaining to me. For if the gods of heaven will not help me, then will I betake me to the powers of hell. From the kingdom of Latium I may not keep him, and the gods decree that he shall have Lavinia to wife. Yet may I hinder the matter. Surely at a great price shall they buy this alliance. And thy dowry, O Virgin, shall be the blood of Italy and of Troy. Then Juno descended to the lower parts of the earth, and called to Alecto from the dwellings of her sisters the Furies, Alecto who loveth war and anger and treachery, and all evil deeds. Even Pluto hateth her, ay, and her sisters likewise, so dreadful is she to behold. And Juno spake to her, saying, Now would I have thee help me, daughter of night, that I lose not my proper honour. I will not that Aeneas should have the daughter of Latinus to wife, or dwell in the land of Italy. Seeing therefore that thou canst set brother against brother, and bring enmity into houses and kingdoms, that they should fall, break this peace that they have made, and bring to pass some occasion of war. Then straightway Alecto betook herself to the dwelling of King Latinus. There found she Amata, the queen, in great trouble and wrath, for she loved not the men of Troy, and would have Turnus for her son-in-law. And the Fury took a snake from her hair, and thrust it into the bosom of the queen. About her breast it glided unfelt, and breathed poisonous breath into her heart. And now it became a collar of twisted gold about her neck, and now a crown about her head, binding her hair. At the first, indeed, when the poison began to work, and her whole heart was not as yet filled with the fever, she spake gently and after the wont of a mother, weeping much the while over her daughter. Art thou then ready, my husband, to give thy daughter to this exile of Troy? Hast thou no pity for thyself, or thy daughter, or me? Well know I that with the first north wind he will fly and carry her away over the sea. And what of thy word, and of the faith that thou hast pledged so many times to Turnus thy kinsman? If thou must seek a son-in-law from the land of the stranger, I hold that they all be strangers who obey not thy rule, and that the gods mean not other than this. And Turnus, if thou wilt enquire more deeply into his descent, is in the lineage of Inachus, and cometh in the beginning from the land of Mycenae." But when she perceived that her husband heeded not these words, and when also the poison of the serpent had now altogether prevailed over her, she ran through the city like to one that is mad. Nay, she feigned that the frenzy of Bacchus was upon her, and fled into the woods, taking her daughter with her, to the end that she might hinder the marriage. Many other women also, when they heard this thing, went forth, leaving their homes. With bare necks and hair unbound, they went, crying aloud the while, and in their hands they held staves of pine, and were clad in the skins of wild beasts. And in the midst of them stood the queen, holding a great pine torch in her hand, and singing the marriage song of her daughter and Turnus, and her eyes were red as blood. Next after this the Fury, deeming that she had overthrown the counsels of Latinus, sped to the city of Turnus the Rutulian. Now the name of the city was called Ardea, and Danae builded it in old time. Ardea is it called to this day, but its glory hath departed. Now Turnus was asleep in his palace, and Alecto took upon her the shape of an old woman, even of Chalybé, who was the priestess of Juno. And she spake, saying, "Turnus, wilt thou suffer all thy toil to be in vain, and thy kingdom to be given to another? King Latinus taketh from thee thy betrothed wife, and chooses a stranger that he should inherit his kingdom. Juno commanded that I should tell thee this in thy sleep. Rise, therefore, and arm thy people, consume these strangers and their ships with fire, and if King Latinus yet will not abide by his promise, let him know for himself what Turnus can do in the day of battle." But Turnus laughed her to scorn. "That the ships of the stranger have come to the Tiber, I know full well. But tell me not these tales. Queen Juno forgetteth me not. Therefore I am not afraid. But thou, mother, art old, and wanderest from the truth, and troublest thyself for naught, and art mocked with idle fear. Thy business it is to tend the temples of the gods and their images, but as for war, leave that to men, seeing that it is their care." Greatly wroth was Alecto to hear such words, and even while he spake the young man shuddered and stared with his eyes, for the Fury hissed before him with 1,000 snakes. And when he would have spoken more, she thrust him back, and caught 2 snakes from her hair, and lashed him therewith, and cried aloud, "Old am I, and wander from the truth, and am mocked with idle fears. Nay, but I come from the dwelling of the Furies, and war and death are in my hand." And she cast a torch at the youth, and fixed it smoking with baleful light in his heart. Then in great fear he woke, and a cold sweat burst forth upon him. And he cried aloud for his arms, and was exceedingly mad for battle. Also he bade the youth arm themselves, saying that he would thrust the men of Troy out of Italy, ay, and fight, if need were, with the Latins also. And the people hearkened unto him, so fair was he, and of noble birth, and great renown in war. Then Alecto hied her to the place where Iülus was hunting the beasts of the forest. Now there was a stag, very stately, with exceeding great horns, which Tyrrhus and his children had brought up from a fawn, and Silvia, a fair virgin who was his daughter, was wont to adorn it with garlands, and to comb it, and to wash it with water. By day it would wander in the woods, and at nightfall come back to the house. This stag, then, the dogs of Iülus having scented, pursued, and indeed Alecto brought it to pass that this mischief shall befall. And Iülus also, following hard upon his dogs, shot an arrow at it, nor missed, for the Fury would have it so, but pierced it through. Then the wounded beast fled back to the house which it knew, being covered with blood, and filled it with a lamentable voice, as one that crieth for help. And Silvia heard it, and cried to the country folk for aid, who came forthwith, Alecto urging them, for the accursed thing lay hid in the woods. And one had a charred firebrand, and another a knotted stick, each such weapon as came to his hand. And Tyrrhus, who chanced to be splitting a tall oak with wedges, led the way, having a great axe in his hand. Then did Alecto climb upon the roof, and sounding with hellish voice through a clarion, sent abroad the shepherd's signal. And all the forest trembled at the sound, and Trivia's lake, and Nar, with his white sulphurous wave, and the fountains of Velia. And trembling mothers pressed their children to their breasts. Then ran together all the country folk, and the youth of Troy hasted also to the help of Iülus. And now they fought not with clubs and charred stakes, but with swords and spears in battle array. Then Almo fell, the eldest of the sons of Tyrrhus, stricken in the throat, with many others round him, and among them the old man Galæsus, even as he offered himself to be a mediator between the two. Most righteous of men was he, and richest likewise, for he had 5 flocks of sheep, and 5 herds of cattle, and tilled the earth with 100 ploughs. But Alecto, when she had accomplished these things, hasted to Juno, and spake, saying, I have done thy bidding, and now, if thou wilt, I will to the neighbouring cities, spreading among them rumours of wars. But Juno answered, It is enough. There hath been the shedding of blood. It were not well that the father should see thee wandering in the upper air, wherefore depart, and if aught remain to be done, I will see to it. End of chapters 15 and 16.